just do a quick, very fast, because we already did introductions in the big room, but we can do a fast one. For some of you, I already saw you at YYB in person. Some of you guys I've had over the calls, but I haven't had a chance to interact with you face to face yet. So obviously, my name is Jessie. I've been working on the System Up project in New Orleans.
My name is Chris Harrison, of course, in the Arkansas office.
Today Butler in Louisiana, based out of New Orleans.
I'm Cleta Kemp in Dallas.
Yolanda Williams, Dallas.
Daniel Hodgson, Dallas.
Hi, Espinosa, Dallas.
Wade Rasky.
Kiana Johnson, Baton Rouge.
Mason Collins, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Miriam Harley, Shreveport.
Catherine McTeer, Dallas.
Alicia Greer, Houston.
Brenda Cisneros, Houston.
Alex Stretcher, Dallas.
So we have this meeting just for staff is divided into 3 parts. One of them is reviewing the training packet that I put together, which is basically based on the calls that we've had already. So for people who haven't been on the calls or haven't been on all the calls, you won't recognize all of the training sheets. But it's essentially just a summary of what we've gone over on the calls and also really concrete step-by-step instructions for what we have to do for each service for healthcare related services that we're going to be offering through Citizen Wealth. It's put together, this is a rough draft. My original plan was for you guys all to have a copy in hand. That didn't happen. I can guarantee you'll have it this week, but I can tell you the contents of it are basically all the front end and back end services that we talked about in the very beginning. So front end services are things that we offer to people who don't have any medical bill problems or debt yet, but who need guidance so that they don't end up with that debt on their hands. So this would be something like helping people to sign up for an insurance plan in depth by looking at their medical situation, calculating the average cost it takes to treat the particular illnesses they have, looking at the drugs they need on the formulary, all that good stuff. So kind of like navigation on speed, essentially, if that makes sense. Just like adding a lot of stuff to navigation. Other front-end services would be like simple things we can offer to members of the workers' associations. We were talking about like if they're not sure they need an authorization for a service, they can call us and we can look into it. If they're not sure how much something is going to cost ahead of time when they go to the hospital, we can call the hospital and look into it. Back-end services are things like somebody has already been to the hospital, they didn't know it was out of network, they got hit by a lot of bills, they don't know how to reduce their bills. So back-end services are like identifying billing code errors or helping somebody apply for charity care. Like if there are no errors, it would be like, okay, you have this problem, but there's this and this like debt relief program that we can sign you up for. Okay, your claim got rejected. This is how we contact your insurance company to properly dispute the claim. So like I said, each of those is in here. The exercise I put together for today, I'm debating whether or not we should do it. I was actually going to throw that out to you guys. I was going to say what we could do is I can take one of the worksheets we have in here, like about billing issues, and have you each divide into groups and look it over and come up with like a scenario, like invent a scenario where somebody comes to you with a billing situation and then follow the instructions on the worksheet to see if it actually gives you the tools you need to like know what to do next. So we could do that, or we can kind of jump on what we were doing this morning, which we've talked about a lot less, which is what are the other services we're going to be offering besides medical services, and also what is our wrap, and how are we actually, when we hit the doors or when we talk to potential people who need our help, what are we saying to them? So I guess since we have limited time, I'm going to throw that question out to you guys. If you're really stuck on, if the medical calls haven't been enough, we can initially do a worksheet together. Or if you guys feel like we've had enough on the medical issues, we can just jump right into other services and outreach. I don't know.
I'm for jumping.
You're for jumping? Okay, anybody else?
I would jump.
Jump. Okay, let's jump. All right, let's jump. I think the answer is clear. But yeah, I wanted to explain the training packets. I know a lot of unanswered questions are out there for how to deal with different situations, but I think with the training worksheets, you guys and your brains, which are great brains, you'll all be able to figure it out. So I guess we can just jump on to other services. So maybe we could just start.
Partially why I brought Chris up here today is
Yeah.
because Chris, as Tony was saying earlier, has like a great deal of expertise in some of these other services, and is doing a lot of things already, like unemployment appeals. And while Jesse was gone, I was like, Chris, walk us through unemployment appeals, because I'm getting texts from someone about helping her do an unemployment appeal right now. So selfishly, I was like, give us some notes. So I feel like unemployment appeals is a big natural one, because that's something that I feel like we've probably all heard, like I need help getting my unemployment from one of the companies we already represent. And then I just thought it might be good to list off some of the things that you already do, and any things that we should be thinking about around them now to prepare for cities enrollment. That's big. But start off with unemployment, just like, what does that look like?
Unemployment appeals, actually, I think we actually have the advantage with the group that we're in. Anybody that has gone through a grievance process, they pretty much know the basics of, the first part of it is getting the policy, knowing the policy, requesting that from the, actually you request it through the unemployment officials, request it directly from the job. But the main things that I think that are really important to know about unemployment appeals, all the, I guess you can say, burden of proof in this situation is not as high. All you have to show is that the person reasonably attempted to do their job. And that even though that they might have violated some type of policy, either that violation wasn't so egregious, or it was by mistake. And I think the witnesses that you have the option to call upon and affidavits are actually your best friends. Because what you really want to do is not only, don't just go by their policy as written. As we all know, every office has their unwritten policy and practices that they have within office that are actually allowed. And sometimes when a lot of cases, when people are fired, and it's one of those cases where, well, sometimes we let them do it, sometimes we don't, the employer never lets you know that. So getting those affidavits saying that this is a common practice, is a practice in our office. You're not going to get a lot of cooperation from the people that are there because, of course they're afraid to lose their job, but, they do listen to and they do take into account former employees who work at or about the same time that you did or with you that might not work there. So you can actually call them as a witness, even if the incident, they wasn't even there for the incident. The background information that they give you is actually really important, and that's it. But other than that, the process is pretty much the same. You have a right to a hearing. If you get turned down, and then at hearing they'll take into account what they wrote you up for, what they fired you for, what the policy is, how serious the infraction is, and what's the difference between the policy and what's actually in place. And I think, once again, I said that's the key part that wins most unemployment appeals. These actions, they have a pattern practice of allowing employees to do this, but they chose, in this case, to fire someone.
I have an example of that, of what you're saying. Right now I'm dealing with a grievance where this one particular member, she's a member of Local 100, she was terminated because with her job, I guess the employees find their own, I guess, like say for instance, she called in, but she didn't notify her supervisor. She called the person herself to work for her, and the person showed up, but she got terminated. And she was like, well, this is how we always do it. I never have to notify my supervisor. As long as we find somebody to work for us, then it's cool. But she actually got terminated for that. And so it's the same thing that you're saying.
Right.
This is a practice.
Perfect example of what I'm talking about.
And she
And
had
it might
statements
also
saying that
render-
this is what we do.
Yeah,
She
and
had
it might be in
statements
the
from other
book that
people.
you have
She's
to
telling the
notify
truth.
your supervisor, but in actuality, they have that regular practice of allowing them, they've always switched shifts or
Yeah.
whatever, and they, in this instance, just decided to fire her or whatever.
For no
Did you
cause,
also
no show.
grieve the fact that she was fired?
So there had been a staff meeting that she missed where they said that this policy is changing, so
Mhm.
we could probably win it at unemployment,
Unemployment,
but
yeah.
win it with company. Because she
Gotcha.
also missed a mandatory staff meeting
That
Gotcha.
explained
Okay.
that was no longer gonna take place.
Oh,
so we
okay.
did win it one place.
Yeah, exactly,
At
that was my
unemployment,
point.
that's something, yeah.
Well, Chris, it's important for people to know that there are some companies, as a matter of policy, automatically deny your unemployment in order to either not pay it, because it affects their experience rating, the level of insurance you pay, and force you to appeal. So
Right.
often, just file an appeal, the company won't show up. They're
Right.
just, I mean, Walmart is a classic example.
Oh, yeah.
Walmart forces you always to file an appeal if you want unemployment. That is their company policy. So
The onus
you
is
could
on-
be, they could agree that they, you left, they fired you, whatever, you got it coming, but if they don't have to pay it, because it's a percentage of, they'll make you have to appeal, but there are lots of companies like
Right.
that, and increasingly more and more.
And I imagine, an affidavit, like, as a union representative, we could also write an affidavit explaining, their, like, the process of, like, I have an FMLA case where they're saying she left the job, when really it was family medical leave.
Right.
So, that would be
What's an
something-
FMLA case?
Family.
Family medical
This,
leave.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, just giving them that extra
Oh.
information.
sorry.
Okay.
Family Medical Leave Act is when you're allowed to take a certain amount of time off and go back to work and get your rightful job position back because you or someone in your family have a medical issue. So that can be, if one of your dependents has a medical problem, then you're able to take off work and take care of them. But also if you have a medical problem, you can do that up to like 6 months, and then you can also get an extension of time. Yeah.
Which is obviously related to our healthcare work.
Right.
If we're dealing with people who are experiencing medical issues, the next question we ask is what impact is that gonna have on their job? And is there anything we could do for them?
And there's a piece of paper that you have to file with your employer by a certain deadline in order to get FMLA approved. So a lot of times people don't get their FMLA approved because they simply didn't file the paperwork. So that's another thing. What other tricks do you have up your sleeve?
Let's see. A lot of people lose out on their money and sometimes their job when it comes to workman's comp cases. On workman's compensation, usually it's clear cut. You don't have to really do too much. As long as you keep all your appointments, always keep in contact with the person. There's somebody going to be handling your case. Make sure that you keep in constant contact with them. If you have to miss an appointment or whatever the case may be, call them immediately. Let them know what's going on. You do have to. The company can tell you which doctor to see, but if you feel like you're not medical needs are being met, you do have the right to go see another doctor in addition to that particular person. But usually, workers comp after that period of time, 7 days, then they'll start paying you if you miss have to miss work for more than that, or they'll put you on light duty. If they put you on light duty, you are obligated to go. The only time that workman's comp it gets complicated if you actually can't have to leave work, or they, so after so much time, and you're getting into this settlement period. They'll keep on paying you out, and they'll keep on paying you before your workman's comp claim. However, if you have become totally disabled because of your workman's comp, that's when it actually becomes a case. You have to establish that, with this disability, I cannot do the job that I'm doing currently, and even with vocational rehabilitation, I can't do the different job. And that's when Social Security and workman's comp kind of collapses on top of each other, because you file for one, but you do not drop the workman's comp case because your employer is still liable to you if you become totally totally disabled. And that's a negotiation process that gets kind of, you know, complicated, you know, so it might be above, you know, regular skill level, but it just depends on how confident you are with relevant laws and calculating, you know, future work and loss, you know, whatever formula that you use, like future work and potential earnings that you could have gotten if you were still able to work in that position. I think one thing, you know, while we're on the subject of Social Security, that's a long and not actually complicated, but just a long process to take people through and get it done right the first time. I think the best trick I have up my sleeve is don't just relax on the one, like if you have a back injury, you know, dislocated, and you have pain, and you know, of course, go ahead and highlight those things. Go ahead and keep seeing the doctors with things, but also to tell your whoever you're advocating for, how's this affected your day-to-day life. Not only are you know, you might not be able to work, but what other things are going on? You're on a lot of extra medication. You know, how is that making you feel? You know, what are the effects of your medication? You know, how's, you know, once if they have significant change in their life and it is affecting them, you know, then I always encourage them to go ahead and see maybe a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a counselor, you know, to talk out an issue, because there might be underlying issues that that also accompany this. And that's what really Social Security really looks at. When if you look at the Social Security handbook, they kind of give you a formula of, okay, if a person needs A plus B or A plus C, then they're disabled under our guidelines. A lot of times when you compound a physical injury with any type of emotional or psychological issues, which naturally come from somebody who's, you know, suffered some serious injury, they're going to have psychological issues, whether they know it, you know, whether they realize it or not. So I always encourage them, you know, then you have that doctor feedback. So once you put all that together within that 3 to 6 month period when you first apply, and most people get denied, you can actually find a greater amount of success. I think maybe only one case that I've done that I've actually had to go several steps into the process. Well, I'll take about 2 steps. One all the way to the administrative level, and one just to like the regular appeal. But one had to go all the way to administrative law. And you can be a representative for somebody that's filing for disability. You don't have to be a lawyer or anything. It's just you need to be versed in what Social Security laws, what actually qualifies for Social Security disability under their definitions, because they have exact definitions. So you might have a disability, but they might say you're still able to work. So you need to know, you know, what formula, to what extent does it have to be to actually qualify. And like I said, the handbook is pretty thick, but you don't have to go. I never go through everything as a case comes to me. I go through that particular section, and then I just read that section, and you know, it pretty much gives you all the information you need. And so I do little things like that.
Chris, and people don't need to not be squeamish or prissy about it. I mean, the two common other problems that are psychological are people self-medicating with liquor and drugs, or impotence. So these are workers. It means tens of thousands of dollars if those things come out in the hearing. If you're not doing your job as a representative, if you don't have a frank conversation with them about what their personal life is. So I'm just putting a finer point on, and you're being very delicate and professional about it, so I'll take it down to reality. Those are the two problems that you're listening for. They can't handle their life with their family anymore because the impact of drugs, trauma, whatever, means they're impotent. That's a problem. People don't like to talk about that. You're dealing with men, women, whatever, but you're going to have to talk about that. And people self-medicate all the time. That's, you know, a huge problem. And that is why once you get a scent of that, you need to get them into a psychologist, get them to talk to somebody. It's worth a lot of benefit for them. The other thing, Social Security is the federal system, which means all the rules are the same. When Chris talks about the unemployment rules and system or workman's compensation system, he's talking about the Arkansas context. Louisiana, Texas, every individual state has a different level of benefits and procedures. Part of the problem for I mean, classically, believe it or not, at one point, and it was 10 years ago or so, Arkansas had the best unemployment rules and benefits in the country. That's not true. I mean, as the Republicans have gotten more and more powerful, they've pulled it back. Louisiana now has almost the worst. I mean, you can be denied unemployment if they can prove that you were fired for cause. You know, it's much more, I don't, is Texas like that as well, Kenny? There's much more leeway in Arkansas, which is part of why he's saying it. So all of what Chris is arguing are proofs that help you win the case. That's all true, but you need to know the individual context of what your rules are in the state. So I don't know if that's part of what the packet is, but this is not, you know, a mimeograph machine. The rules in Arkansas are different than the rules in Texas, or different than the rules in Louisiana.
Yeah. There's nothing about unemployment or workers' comp in this packet. This thing really covers everything we've covered off thus far, and it's very healthcare oriented. But I see this training packet as an open-ended thing. And that's something really important that I need to know, I need to let you guys know, is as we move forward with this, we're gonna be slowly implementing more and more services, and everything we do and learn while we're helping people is gonna serve as training information for people in the future who work with us, or for ourselves, when we need to look back at something. So
We'll just, again, I think that's a reason to continue to do the calls on a semi-regular basis to continue to collaborate and add things on to these packets. I think what I'm saying here is like someone from Louisiana would need to do our own research about workman's comp, you know, et cetera, and then there will be some delegating on different pieces, so that we get more done sooner.
assigning different people from different offices to do research on issues in their state.
That would be kind of our first one.
Yeah. Now I think, is there?
You got a question?
Are there any other?
You said about the Social Security Management. Can you tell me what's the name of it, or where can we access it?
You can access it on just online, you know, SSA.gov, and you know, the whole entire handbook. You can get access to it. It's several thousand pages itself, so there's no reading. Don't download it.
Don't download it without a case of paper handy.
For every one of you.
Well, in Houston, they would never think they could copy anything that was more than 5 or 6 pages, for sure.
You gotta tear it up.
Well, I was going to ask you if there's anything else you have to share, or if we should.
Oh no.
Or if there are any other.
Oh yeah, I
so
do.
Also, what do you charge people for these things?
It just kind of depends. Usually, me personally, I take into account of I pretty much know where their finances are. People that are that, like for instance, taxes. The cheapest that you can get taxes in my area is around $80. So I always undercut the person, just undercut, not by that much. The cheapest that's reputable place that's around. And then, you know, also sell myself as, you know, I'm here not just for this one time, but you can actually come back to me. So I have an added benefit to my service versus anyone else. And I actually had a question for you. I heard you mention that you use Tax Act, which I do also, but they charge for the state portion. If somebody wants to do the state portion, do you just have them cover that fee there? I don't know if it's Jermaine right now, but I was curious.
In Louisiana, you can do your taxes on the state website for free. Which ended up being kind of a technical issue because we had people doing their federal taxes on one website and state taxes on another, and some people just preferred to pay the fee and have it all be part of one package that got deposited into their account rather than going over to the separate website. But yeah, I didn't resolve that completely when people were okay for paying for the direct deposit of the state taxes.
And I'm sorry, that was like.
And most people did opt to do that.
And Tax
I think
Freedom
that was
is
a good
another one.
question.
Have you all used Tax Freedom before through TurboTax? It's another free software that people can actually do their
federal and state taxes.
Everybody can do their taxes for free.
Yeah, on, well, if they're under a certain amount, then they don't have any electronic fees at all. So if they make under 25,000 or a year,
Right.
or if they've been in the military, then there's no fees at all for e-filing it or anything. It's called taxfreedom.com.
No, we're really only talking about offering the service to people who can't do their own taxes.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but
But
when
you're
it
saying that it
It
combines federal and
combines the
state.
federal and the state
So
together.
it's all in one.
So it's all in one. You get to do all of it at the same time.
So, but when, as far as fees go, when they add extra, W-2s or any extra, when it starts itemizing, then the price goes up. For instance, someone who has a lot of gambling winnings, you gotta enter each and every one of those in as you would a W-2. So for each additional document, I might add on an extra $5 for each, document of that nature that you have to
How much do
completely
you charge
itemize.
to tax?
I normally charge $150.
See?
I
Now,
charge $150 flat rate.
Chris is charging $70, $75 and working his way up.
I used to do $50 when I first started doing it, but yeah, I do $150, and still some of my friends are like, Yolanda, that's way too cheap. But I tell them because I enjoy it, and I like helping other people, because they charge $300, $400, $500.
Right.
And so I told them, I said, no, I'm not going to charge somebody that much, because it doesn't take that much time to do most of the taxes, especially when it's something
Right.
you enjoy.
Yeah.
So I just
If
charge
there's just like one W-2, it doesn't take that much
Yeah.
time. The only reason my price point is the way that it is just because the area that I'm in,
Right.
that what the competition is charging, I just get a lot more value when I undercut, just slightly undercut.
Right.
Because the difference between $80 and $70, wow,
Yeah,
I can get the same thing and I can get it a lot cheaper, and I,
Yeah.
and I can get an appointment and I can get,
Right.
in and out. So, well, trust me, if somebody next to me was paying, charging 200, closest around me, I'd probably be charging at least 180.
Yeah. But if it's an easy,
We understand your strategy.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah, I was almost surprised you weren't charging $79.99.
So if it's a 1040 easy, I just charge $50 for that.
Yeah, it-
Because they're so
yeah.
cut and dry.
I know this one
with
lady,
those.
her own job. She
So
survived the rest of the year. She makes that much.
How about Fair Labor Standards Action filings and appeals?
I do not do that.
It's a very I've learned it's very simple to file Fair Labor Standard Act complaints. I keep the form on the file cabinet. Somebody complains about not getting paid overtime. I just pull it out, fill out that form, submit it. But if somebody's hurt and they come to you, if they've been hurt on the job, it's an easy matter to file a occupational safety and health act. And if you attach a picture of the injury to that really motivates them to do something.
So you're talking about a two-step thing, not only the workman's comp they could get, but also trying to correct the issue at the job site with OSHA.
Yeah.
You're talking about filing 2 complaints on that injury.
Yeah, well, yeah, if somebody is hurt, then OSHA needs to be informed, and then they're supposed to correct the cause of the injury. And I'm just saying, it's easy to get that done. If you photograph the injury and attach that photograph to the complaint, that motivates them to do something quicker.
And I'm just repeating what you're saying, and I'm linking it to what Chris said. But here's the other thing. In OSHA, and this is what a lot of union representatives don't fully understand, there are sometimes mandatory bargaining rights that you get when you run into an OSHA complaint. Even though there's not a recognized union, even though you may not have a majority, you may not have a collective bargaining agreement, in an OSHA circumstance, you may find that you have the ability to force the employer to sit down with you and bargain. This is also particularly true in the Department of Transportation for bus drivers. So the Department of Transportation has this rule before they can get an expansion of a DOT grant. they have to, whether there's a union or not, assure that there is a process by which they can meet collectively with the workers. So these are you need to keep this in mind. If it's an OSHA case, you may be able to force the employer to sit down with you and those workers, in addition to what Kenny's saying and what Chris is saying. And if it's a bus driver, a transportation person, somebody like that, you may be able to force them to sit down with you and others. So these are real part of the super manual that Jesse's putting together on this that people will all have to memorize. Here's the other thing about Fair Labor Standards Act violations, and Kenny and the Dallas staff and I went through this as well, is that the Texas Workforce Commission, I'm not sure about every state, tries to lure people on fair labor standards, wage theft issues to come through them. Here's why you don't want to do that. Filing a complaint under Fair Labor Standards means you get double damages when you win. And if you can prove it was deliberate, in other words, there may have been previous filings at the same employer for that same violation, then you can get even higher damages. You also get 2 years time limit. None of those kinds of conditions exist under Texas Workforce Commission. So anytime you have a wage theft issue or somebody's, like we have with our cafeteria people in the Dallas schools and some of our bus drivers, that's why we try to push it into Fair Labor Standards. Public employers are under Fair Labor Standards in the same way that private employers are, due to a Supreme Court ruling called Garcia versus the City of San Antonio. I don't know when that was now. I guess early 80s sometime was when it was finally settled, but before that there was controversy, but now you can force all those issues in. And these are things that are so much just like the regular grievances we handle either at the schools or at the work sites or at the state of Arkansas, that this should be something we know cold, like Bible verses, you know?
I think another thing that is good that we learned in bargaining the other day at ResCare was pretty much, and this is very long term, but for people who are filed based on abuse, so this was an example of a worker who was fired because the company said that they committed abuse or neglect. Fired, we couldn't prove it. They had a state report, but basically then it goes to state, and state has to then prove it, but there's a whole appeal process there with the state, and if you can win against state and you get through that, which would take maybe a year to 2 years because everyone's so understaffed, there's no one in those departments, then you could go back to the company, show that they shouldn't have been fired in the first place and that you've now proved it through state, and then you wonder how much back pay you get there. Or like, you could definitely get a job back at that point. So that's very long term, but.
And the number of cases, particularly in nursing homes and other situations where we can prove that it was neglect as opposed to abuse, makes all the difference in the world. We always win arbitrations, and we can prove if it was understaffing, too many beds, too few employees, blah, 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 neglect, or not enough diapers bought, or supplies, or not enough people scheduled for showers and somebody fell. That's not necessarily abuse. That could be, that's neglect directed by the employer, not abuse. And it's important because not only do you win the job back, but in every one of these states, if they can prove that you were abusive, you'll never work in the industry again. You're on the list, you're out of there, you need another career. So that's important for people.
I also, in addition to these, 2 weeks ago, we started to put together a list over the phone of different things that each office wanted to offer. When I was thinking we could go over that, I'm interested to know when people suggested those, if they already have some particular form of expertise in the things that were suggested, if they've thought really critically about like how easy it would be to offer certain things. So we had a lot of discussions about immigration issues, and we talked about the possibility of offering English and Spanish classes. I was curious, I know Alicia, you suggested that. I'd be curious to know how doable that feels for people, those kinds of things feel for people now. Just gonna pull up the list. But I don't know, I mean, Wade, I could ask for your input. How do you think classes is something that we would be interested in offering, or does that feel too complex to put together?
I don't think we would want to offer an ESL class, but it's easy enough for us to find somebody who would do that and channel people. Really, I see your, I mean.
Prepare a list of who can in your
Right,
area.
and then, I think it'd be wonderful if we were competent in the area of immigration, but we're not competent in that area. But there's so much ripoff in immigration advice now, where people will promise you if you pay X, you know, $2-3 grand, we'll get you a card or we'll get you through the system. And almost all of that is totally bogus. You're talking about a totally predatory thing. So even if we didn't have that expertise in-house, but knew 1 or 2 people who would give people a fair rate and who we would be able to vouch for, and maybe we even get a finder's fee, but you know, somebody who's straight up. There's bound to be a couple of honest people. I mean, maybe not in Little Rock, but I was thinking in Little Rock or New Orleans or, you know, in Dallas.
Maybe even in Little Rock.
But I know in Phoenix, when we were doing this trial on foreclosure modifications, we almost got into the immigration stuff because it was such a ripoff. I mean, people there, I mean, you can imagine a huge number of undocumented immigrants there, charging $5-10 grand just to steal them from people. I mean, they didn't have a chance. They weren't going to follow through. And once again, you're an undocumented immigrant. Once you come up with that money and pay it, you got no comeback. You know, they want to steal from you. They just stole from you. So being a trusted advisor is something that Citizen Wealth can do even outside of its expertise. We can vet people. We can make sure that we stand behind them. We can monitor the case. Don't you think that's right, Willie?
That is correct. In Little Rock, for example, we have a few lawyers that are like that. And the consulate keeps a list of the ones they recommend. That's something we can tap into also.
Okay, well, that's a good idea too. But what you would do is the outreach. You know, let's say you followed this model. You went to the local consulate for, you know, the Mexican consulate in your city, Houston, Dallas, New Orleans, or whatever. You found out who the list of 5 people are. You then reach out to those 5 people. You sit down with them. You actually make the meeting, put the face to the face, say, here, we may have a lot of people coming through. I need to know your rates. I need to vet you. I need to know that I can check on, you know, Mrs. Hernandez's case when it comes up. And, you know, I'm going to be on you like, you know, white on rice so that you can, that's value added. I mean, this Citizen Wealth Center stuff works at healthcare, at everything. If people understand, we're like that with them.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, I mean, what seemed to me to come up over and over again, medical bills absolutely came up today, but so did you know, interactions with the criminal justice and justice system and immigration. And the criminal justice system is one of those things where, no, we're not going to become, you know, paralegals or something, but people get ripped off. I mean, you know, it's an ongoing process with people, you know, forced back into the system because they didn't know they had a court fee or some, you know, even though they've been in the can. I mean, so these are problems.
Yeah.
It just seems like we're creating a really large list, and we're going to have to figure out what we want to pick to do and what things we're going to refer people.
Well, and I think we're going to need a database for people that monitor.
Database is a huge thing with having
You can do a
volunteer.
booklet, maybe like a little small booklet.
Speak up.
A small booklet for with all the resources that people can have, so all the members will have that at hand, and they'll be able to go to, you know, those different foundations or, you know, different places that offer those services.
Practically speaking, there's no way you're going to be able to keep a booklet evergreen. The day it's printed, it'll be out of date. So it's going to have to be web-based, where people can go on our site.
Okay, that's
Yeah, that's probably what the same. I think we're probably saying the same thing, but we're going to have to enable people to be able to look at that. I mean, it's not. Unfortunately, there's not going to be a booklet that says, we used to do these years ago. We used to do workers' rights booklets. You could do 20 pages. People actually know their rights. Now it just starts there. That's just like the taster, you know. You can't even get to the first course on what we can give.
Okay.
And it's gonna be different for every office, obviously. It's all gonna be localized. So that also means that as much as we're trying to put out, you know, from New Orleans, so much of this is gonna be who do we have in Dallas and Shreveport and Baton Rouge and Lafayette. We're gonna have to figure it out for every. That means we're all gonna be doing this kind of research. So this has to be homework that everyone does in their different parts of this.
I think where Chris can be an asset is on stuff that, I mean, there are federal rules, right? On the Social Security. And once again, even the number of, here's an issue we should be great at. The number of workers who are fired for union activity dwarfs the number of unions really organizing. Because what is National Labor Relations Board protected activity? It's any concerted activity, which means two people. One person mouthing off, you're not protected by the NLRB, so don't even bother with that case. You have to at least try to organize somebody with you. But once there are two or more people who protest conditions at the job, even if they don't know how to spell union, they are protected under the National Labor Relations Act for 8A1, surveillance, you know, any coercion, intimidation, threats, anything that goes, or for an 8A3, which is an unjust firing. So yes, in a private sector, it is employment at will, but that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you lose your protections under the National Labor Relations Act if you've acted in concert to protest conditions at the job, to ask for more wages, to complain about a holiday not taken, to say that, you know, you just, you know, didn't get full pay for, you know, your lunch break being interrupted. All those things are protected activity. You could file a charge or help somebody file an individual charge on an 8A3 with the National Labor Board, and they'll win. So, Del?
And I'm just gonna throw out two incidents in Dallas. They fired one of our workers for at the Dallas County for her license being suspended for 1 day. The other one, they fired him for not having insurance, and his license was suspended. We understand that was one of their laws, but could we actually file that case at the National Labor Standard, because it's two issues?
No. Any public employee is not covered under the National Labor Relations Act. Only private sector employees are covered under the National Labor Relations Act.
Which is different from FLSA.
Which is different from FLSA because, you know, you can't pay someone in the public sector. You used to be able to, but you can't since the early 80s, early 80s, pay somebody less than minimum wage in a public sector job.
Now, another thing that we talked about over the calls and which came up during our larger meeting today was loan counseling. I don't know, is there anybody in any of our offices who has experience with loan counseling? Any kind of
New Orleans,
like housing loans, student loans?
Okay, the first thing is there are two streams. One is credit counseling, which is one thing, and that's a very, once again, very lucrative market, private sector, big charges, how you do credit repair. The other is loan counseling, and loan counseling traditionally means how you get a housing loan to buy a house. Sometimes it melds together because you got to fix your credit in order to try to get a loan. So, you know, but they're actually two things. I mean, when we used to run all the big housing programs at Acorn, there's an ongoing debate, never resolved, about whether or not we should do fee-for-service credit counseling, because there's a little bit more certification you need, or loan counseling on housing.
So there is a certification you need to do credit counseling.
There is a certification you can get. If you wanted to compete head-on with the, you know, the National Credit Counseling, whatever, I mean, there's a big company that does it, then, you know, it'd help if you were certified. But there's a lot of Joe Schmoes out there doing both. And HUD has a certification process for a HUD loan counselor in a housing area, but that's largely so you can get money from HUD. There's nothing that says you would have to have that in order to help somebody get a loan from the bank. But you probably couldn't charge the same.
Yeah.
I would say a big thing that like Marie and Beth still do are housing fairs. Every year in Lake Charles, they pull about 500 people to a fair. They have banks there, they have real estate agents there, they have, you know.
Well, and we're going to cover that in the staff meeting here before dinner, because they're on their way to Houston next Thursday, Friday, and the weekend in order to do training with the Houston staff on how to do this sort of housing. You know, this is, Forrell's probably mentioned, maybe Kenny mentioned, we talked about this last time, but it'd be open for them to come. And so they're going to at least, we haven't gotten them to Dallas, but we got them almost to Houston.
Well, it might be that the loan counseling is something the work we want to split between different offices. Obviously, we have the asset of.
I think we would mine Marie and Beth before we put anyone start from scratch, because they've been working on housing for 10 years. They ran their own program, so.
I mean, the housing stuff, Texas, you got nothing but open road. And Little Rock is, those of you who are in Little Rock know, I mean, that's what, what's this, Dixon. That's what Dixon does in the front office.
Downstairs.
Yeah, so he's doing that, so we probably don't have as emergency a need. But I think, you know, it's a referral fee situation on that. If we start running people through the Citizen Wealth Center and we find somebody who needs that kind of thing, then we refer it to them and we work out the terms. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so our next suggestion from Texas was we talked about the possibility of helping people apply for universities or any kind of vocational programs and helping them choose higher education institutions. And I don't know who that suggestion came from. Does anybody have recollection?
I don't know, but it's great.
I personally feel like that's something I probably could do. I think it's relatively easy to fill out a university application. Obviously, it would fit very well with us having a clear picture of people's income and their financial situation, what they can afford. It would fit with the piece of helping them apply for non-predatory student loans.
Taxes and FAFSA are the, we have to use 90% of FAFSA applications are your taxes. So it is 90% easier to do your FAFSA application when you do your taxes. You do it separately.
And I can verify that even young children can learn how to fill out that form. Is that correct, Danae?
That's correct.
Because I sure wouldn't fill it out.
Yes.
So if they wanted to apply, they got to learn how to fill out the form.
At 15.
At 15. And if you can fill it, my view is if you can't fill out the form for school, you can't go to school. But look, here's the other thing, is giving people advice not, I mean, there's so many predatory for-profit institutions that are just doing nothing but preying on our members and our communities, you know, trying to teach them they can be web designers or game designers if they pay $30,000 to go to some course here and there that, you know, is the Institute of Technical whatever, and they end up with just humongous student debt for stuff that they never had a chance to get a job on. And, you know, part of this is going to be saying no. It's, you know, it's better for them to just apply for the local community college or the local college or whatever sometimes in some of these programs.
Yeah, I think we could play an important role in vetting those.
Yeah.
And I think if we're dealing with families who have kids, obviously they're going to be interested in their children receiving assistance to pick the right places to go to school. So
But I want to underline one more thing. This is not just a passive thing of wondering who comes in the door. All these schools are now trying to recruit low and moderate income students who are not part of the normal constituency. You need to reach out. You know, if you're in Houston, you need to go down and hang at the Rice, and you know, whatever, you know, in Dallas, you need to go over to SMU and TCU and all these high, you know, high price things and say, look, We have very qualified people coming to the Citizen Wealth Center. We'd be glad to, you know, we want to know if we can help direct them, Hendricks or whatever, direct them to you if we find a qualified student.
And actually going to speak to the counselors there, because a lot of times they're not college counselors when they're at college, but they're whatever counselor that you, the admitting advisors or whatever, the admitting counselors, they will walk you through the application process. They will walk, you know, applicants through the application process. Yeah. And how to do the interview and all that. But that's some of what we would want to make the initial contact and do that front end works that we wouldn't have to handhold the whole time. We'd want to be able to.
But I think there's a fee for service here. These people are now paying tens of thousands of dollars to go send people out to recruit. We're telling them passively, you can sit on your butt here. If we're going to have a stream of people, we're going to be looking at people for student loans. You're negotiating essentially a referral fee. If we produce, you know, people that have this average and this ACT or SAT to you to make an application, and you're willing to do the right thing by them, we're going to refer them to you as opposed to blank, blank, blank. You know, that needs to be something. They're essentially paying us for our time in doing that. I sent Jesse a message today. So the Louisiana, a lot of these states have health cooperatives, for example, in healthcare. Louisiana Health Cooperative, which was the nonprofit cooperative set up, one of the four. We're not like Texas, we didn't have 38 choices. We had 4 little choices. They were one. They only recruited 7,000 applications under affordable care, and they projected 23,000. We need to reach out to them and say, hey, you know, tell us what your program is. We'd like to see nonprofit cooperatives. You know, we're going to see lots of people come to the Citizen Wealth Centers in you know, these 3 cities. How can we help? And how can you help pay for our time to help you?
Yeah.
They're out there whining in the Advocate today. I sent it to you in an email. You just didn't have a chance to read it.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Yeah. Now, got to be on that email 24/7. You know, you got to be ready. You got to be burning it. It's a fast world. Let me tell you.
Because you never know.
You never know. You got to live with me on my world. I don't want to hear about your world. We got, you know, go. It's going now.
All right. Well, I mean, it seems like we've got a pretty healthy list, like you were saying, potential services. I feel that some of them are much more easily put in place right away than others. So that will be noted again as we put together the training packet. If I need specific offices to write a worksheet for a particular issue, believe me, I will be contacting you in the next couple of weeks about it. I think maybe what we need to talk about now is outreach and RAPs.